All right, so welcome to the OneBook Flex, event. This is the event right now on campus. So of course, as you know, our OneBook is Just Mercy, which I'm pretty certain you have read as probably, and as well as perhaps watched the movie as well. So we just actually are richer because we have more resources to use as we teach the text in our different classes. All right, so what I'm going to do, so when I was preparing for this, I really knew I was going to be talking to experts, people who have already been using the book. So it's really more like a session where we are sharing. I'd be interested more in hearing how you approach the text more than how I do it. But of course, I will start by doing a quick rundown of, I have a list of the items that I include when I attempt to teach the text. And I can just describe it as attempting to teach it because it's probably, in my classes anyways, next to the new Jim Crow, is probably one of the most difficult books to teach because of moments that happen in the text that may really put us in a very challenging sort of emotional state. So there's a lot that's involved. It's not just you can say, come on, let's read, and then start answering questions. So I would be interested in finding out how you guys deal with that as well. But I still, of course, because I've created the syllabus and everything, I still have a checklist of things that I try to do. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I do with this text. Okay, so this is entitled How I Use Just Mercy in My Courses. Earlier on, I wanted to have a nice, that's why you see that remaining E, I edited the title. I wanted to have section A, how I have used it in the past and how I plan to use it in the future. Because each time has been different and even the rigor sometimes or engagement has also been different. So basically just bullet points. So we use it as a supplementary full-length reading text because this is a class that already has, the first time I taught it, that is in the fall 2019, I was actually teaching the English 300 108 Umoja. So the Umoja course at that time had a total of, I think, 5 texts, all heavy material. So this one was just one. I would say Just Mercy was actually our relaxing, when we, our text to relax and take a break from these other issues. Can you imagine? So we are saying, oh, this is our sort of relaxing read, but of course, how wrong. So it's a supplementary full-length text for the course. We approach the text in either multi or dual genre way. I really point out that it's to be viewed at one level as a memoir of Brian Stevenson's career. So if you look at it that way, there are actually elements that you see of that specific genre as well. So students and sometimes just focus on the creative aspects of the memoir. Then, but of course, also as a nonfiction book on the American social justice, criminal justice system. Then before reading the introduction, I ask students to reflect on their past career path, what they thought they were planning to do, maybe going K through 12, and then their goals as they enter college, because these are first-time college students mostly in the classes I use it. Then we read and discuss the introduction, breaking down the text into short passages assigned to student groups for mini presentations and student teaching opportunities. The introduction is very rich, as those of you who have read it might attest. It's one of the richest introductions. Also, one of the most in terms of teaching you just about, someone's resolve to work on what they believe is the right thing to do. And it also is almost the subject of his first major TED talk. You can tell that he pretty much was echoing some of the things he says in the introduction. So we also watched therefore the 2013 TED talk, which covers much of what the introduction covers. The introduction is critical. It covers all the themes he will expand on. All subsequent readings assignments are divided into weekly readings of 2 or 3 chapters. So once we are done with the intro and accompanying activities, then the rest of the book really is divided on a week-by-week basis. Typically, we can manage 2 chapters. I mean, I start maybe with just chapter 1 at first, and then because we'll run out of weeks, so to speak, so they will read 2 or 3 chapters at a time, and that seems to work very well. I don't really check. So the one thing that I do then is to make sure that they are reading, in addition to our classroom discussions, we use the chapter by chapter discussion questions posted on the reading guide on the EGI website. Stevenson's website. I'll show you if you haven't visited it already. Then students complete analytical and critical responses. So my class, the English 300, 108, the sequence of essays really moves from critiques, summaries, paraphrases, critiques, synthesis, analysis, argument. So we also mirror this, the mini assignments accompanying this text mirror that sequence of skills that I'm trying to teach. We use class time for students to share their responses. Student groups are assigned suggested activities. So as you might have, if you have done any type of research, there's so much material available to teach this book. There's even a 245-page guide for K through 12, or everything on the same text, lesson plans, tests, quizzes, everything. Students are asked to research the facts of some of the cases mentioned in the book, and then they will present to the class talking about what they found out, the specific details, the facts of the case, and so on. Then we watch supplementary video presentations on justice, Black Lives, Black Minds Matter. Then the midterm is based on Just Mercy, a timed essay set as a quiz on Canvas. So this is really what gets everyone to read as well, because a whole midterm essay is based on the book. So that gets, at least I think by then we would have read 9 or 10 chapters. So that prepares them for the midterm. It's worth 10% of their grade, and they choose from 6 or 7 prompts. Students are asked to work on advocacy projects similar to Brian Stevenson's. So this is also about doing something. If you notice a problem and talk about it, Stevenson demonstrates what individuals can contribute to resolve the issues the problems in our society. Students get points for involvement in OneBook related events and activities. So, as I asked them to attend a number of, especially when we're on campus, they would be going to all the different events. But of course, I'm aware too that I'll try to incorporate the OneBook events we may have online, in the online mode as well, to just make the class also be part of that. Students read the whole book. As I said, it's a long text with a lot of issues that may not be, that could be very difficult for a lot of us, for a lot of the students, but we read it anyways. We read the whole book, especially in the context of an Umoja class, we are already, those are the issues the class is working on. Those are the topics, the core topics for the class. So it's very important then that we read the full text and with the discussion questions encouraging students to move on to the next group of chapters. Then the responses allow them to express themselves. So they are not just perhaps in their analysis or critiques. It's a wonderful book. Stevenson is a brilliant person, but a critical response will allow students to, choose to disagree with certain stances, certain standpoints, so they get to express themselves as well. For instance, if you don't agree with the sheer quantity of cases represented or presented in the text, they also feel there was excess in terms of the emotional burden they have to shoulder. So those are things they get to express themselves in these responses. We use the book as one of the sources for the essays they write as well. It's a very good source. In fact, it becomes a primary source for nearly all the essays. In fall 2019, we were very fortunate to go to the actual, special screening, premiere screening of the movie as well in December. So that was a nice bonus there. And of course, my students were quick to notice that the movie was slightly, some even said a little watered down. As hard as it is on a lot of audiences, it seemed to not represent. And we also discovered the rating was PG-13, so a lot of that perhaps went into deciding the extent of the pain to be represented, or the trauma, really. Okay, so these are some of the things I do. Of course, definitely, by no means an exhaustive list, because there is more. And what I like about teaching a text like this is perhaps a good percentage of what I end up teaching is what emerges in the classroom. In other words, the students can steer the direction of the class a lot, because they can decide sometimes when to slow down on certain aspects of the text. So I always leave a lot of room for students to affect or to influence the direction we take. All right, so challenges in the reading and teaching of Just Mercy. I already mentioned some of these, but to some students, really to all students, it's a difficult book because of the issues covered. The number of cases in the book can be overwhelming, excess. So those two based on the text. Then in terms of, as an instructor, for the teacher, it's a benefit and a disadvantage. There's so much material already from all sources on Just Mercy online, most by university, by universities and so on. So what this does is, you may give some discussion questions, let's say from the EGI website, but then students can just easily find answers as well. So it limits, it may encourage even some cases of plagiarism as well. So it's always important to remind students to acknowledge and cite their sources appropriately. So in terms of originality, it might get easily compromised because it's a quick Google search and you have all the answers sometimes. In one semester is impossible, so you might have to sort of be selective, including it's really okay not to finish the whole book. Even the semester ends and you are still working on chapter 9, that might be okay actually, because it allows you to cover in useful detail the few chapters that you have selected. So excerpts could be a good approach as you move from chapter to chapter. We just want to, in my class, we told ourselves we just want to do justice, to the book, right? And we know the amount of work the author put in there, so we also want to do justice to it. Then consider using only excerpts, yes, to in your approach. So at this point, I noticed, you see, because I know all of you, I even forgot to have us introduce ourselves. So at this point, these are your questions. Now, what's your experience? What are your goals in terms of using the text this semester? And what questions do you have so far based on my really skeleton representation of what I do with the text? All right, so we'll start just a quick intro. So again, I'm Emmanuel Sigauke, and I will be teaching, let me admit, I will be using Just Mercy in this time in 2 courses. So my English 300 108 Umoja and a standalone 300. All right, who is next? So Lisa, who are you?
That's my question also. I teach English, and I have not used Just Mercy before. And so and this is my first time teaching online. And also my first time in 5 years teaching English 300. So it means I'm starting from scratch. And in terms of, it's such a mind spin to, as you guys all know, to teach online. It's so different. So I'm trying to figure out, because there is such a wealth here, like how to approach it. So I really appreciate being here and being able to learn from you guys.
Thank you. All right, so I see we have Maureen.
Hey.
Hi.
Nice to see everybody, and thanks for doing this session, Emmanuel. I really appreciated when you were talking a minute ago about how you sort of let the students make the pace. That's super good teaching, and I just wanted to acknowledge it and say thanks. Thanks for being a great colleague and a good teacher. My name is Maureen Moore, and I teach humanities at Cosumnes River College. There's my introduction. I don't have any classes that really intersect with this text very well. The only one that even approaches it is my Latin American humanities class, where in the last module, we deal with the prison industrial complex and the issues of immigration for people who are crossing the border. So as a consequence, I only use this text as an extra credit opportunity. And so in my classes, students set up a blog early in the semester, and at the end of each module, they blog. And so as an extra credit opportunity, I have a module where they do a couple of reading discussion things, all extra credit, and then they do a book review of the text at the end, blog it. So it's optional, not everybody picks it. Probably in the last semester, I probably had maybe 3 people in each class, opt for the extra credit. So that's how I use it. Yeah.
Wow. So I know Heather uses blogs too, but my question to you, Maureen, before we move to Heather is, how do you convince them to even understand or appreciate what a blog is? They have since moved on.
So I have a whole section in module 0, excuse me, where I explain first, what is humanities, and I give a little bit of background, and then what are sources, primary, secondary sources. Then they take a little quiz, 3-point quiz, and then we talk about the intersection of sources and humanities with social media. And so I talk about how social media content that's being produced today is in fact primary source material that people in the future will be using. And also that there's a burgeoning field in the humanities called digital humanities. And yeah, it's a super cool field, and it includes, it's big picture humanities. So it includes literature and languages and history and political science and religion. All of that is digital humanities.
Okay.
And essentially taking old texts and evaluating them in new ways. And that's the digital, right? So presenting old texts in new digital spaces. So I give all of that to the students. And then I show them about 4 examples of blogging, including my own. I've been blogging for over 10 years myself. And so I show them a bunch of examples of different kinds of blogging techniques and practices. And I make a bunch of little 2-3 minute, sometimes 8-minute videos demonstrating with screen recordings and then my face in the corner of various blogging techniques. And then it's an assignment. It's actually the 3rd thing they have to do in module 0 in order to remain in the class.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, the majority of students are super excited to blog. Like over and over, they say, oh, I've always wanted to blog, but I never knew how.
Okay.
And so this is super cool and I'm excited. I mean, just over and over, that's what I hear. So
Right,
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I took so long.
Oh, no. You have no idea how this is helping. Okay.
Okay.
Heather.
I don't intend to use the book in my courses. I did develop the OneBook Canvas site, and I'm just here to learn, and I have changed from blogging. So I am not blogging in creative writing right now. We did some Instagram and some other things. I have blogging and as an extra credit activity.
Okay.
So I'm just here to learn. If you don't know, I have an injured vocal cord. This is why I sound like Dr. Fauci. So it's good to see you all.
Nice seeing you, Heather. So it's good to know that you have since, I call it, they have since moved on. Because when I show my blogs, it's like, they're like, oh, you're still on my Facebook, right?
Some of them are interested in blogging and creative writing. But what I was having them do is have them do it as a group activity, which was really fun.
Okay.
And I still have people blogging from the old blogs, which is wonderful. But it became like, this doesn't really meet the student learning outcomes, and it's a little bit of extra work, and I was pulling back my slave driving a little bit.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Next, who wants to go next?
Hi, my name's Christina Washington, and I teach English 300 and the 300-108 combo classes in the semester, along with a 110 class. And I'll be using Just Mercy in the English 300-108 combo class. So last semester was my first semester going through the whole book. We had used parts of it before, but last semester we used the whole book, and I didn't really know my audience yet when we started the book. I didn't know our class, so a lot of our students were international students and English language learners, even though Brian Stevens gives us some history of the Jim Crow South and of slavery, I feel like I could have done a better job of establishing more context with that class. So moving forward, I'd like to do that. And also with all of the recent events with George Floyd, you know, all of the narratives that we hear, I want to give students the opportunity to rewrite some of that narrative. And I learned that in a workshop that Jose Alfaro gave us. I think it was last semester, I can't remember. But anyway, he, and I hope I'm not, maybe this was my takeaway, maybe it wasn't his intention, but this is what I'm doing with it. He had encouraged us to question the author's intentions. So with Just Mercy, I want to do a couple of little activities where students have the opportunity to rewrite some of the narratives, particularly about the children who suffer in the book, like asking the question, what would have happened, or how could this child's outcome have changed if the environment and circumstance had been different, and have them research what would have had to have happened, so that it's not just another sad narrative that you're sad about. Anyway, but they have a little more ownership of it. So I want to do that. And yeah, so that's one of the things that I'm changing this semester. Two things. I know that I think I need to give more resources of historical context and have them challenge those narratives and really examine and write a change. Like anyway, that's what I'm thinking about.
Can I ask you a question about that, Christina? That sounds really interesting to me. When you say how the outcome could have changed if certain circumstances were different, and then you said you have them research it so that it's not just, you know, making up stories. How do you guide that? Like, how do you guide that research to finding some sort of substantive, I guess, support for what might be like a reasonable alternative outcome?
Well, a lot of the parts in the book, as Emmanuel was saying, is a primary source where Stevenson reveals that some of these kids are, or not just kids, he threads through mental health, women who are incarcerated, and children. And so a lot of the time what happens is it is ultimately the legal representation, but that they were lost through foster care, they were lost at school, they didn't do well at school, and maybe they didn't do well at school for all of those reasons. So I probably would incorporate something about education in there, have them have a resource with that too, just to look at, say what connections can you make. But Stevenson does a pretty good job of kind of laying that out for us as well, but we have to, I guess, ask the right questions so the students can make those connections. But it's there. It's you know, it is a book about social justice in the penal system, but it's very much all of those layers that come through foster care and education and social workers. I think Stevenson might even say that somewhere in the book, where it's a lot of our hands are involved in this issue. So that's probably how I would, I probably need to find that passage. That would be key, and ask them to look up those issues that are in that passage. Maybe let me write myself a note. That will be helpful for me. Thank you. That's a good question.
Yeah, and I found the representation of children was the most disturbing for my students. I had one student include that subtopic in every essay, in every response. It really resonated with them. So maybe they were looking for that alternative kind of something in them was hankering to sort of represent this in a certain way. And as I said earlier, talking of the memoir elements, as an author, Stevenson is really in control of how much he presents in the book and for what effect. So we have the facts as they are, but what do you choose to highlight? What do you choose? And what extent. So I think that's a very good approach. As Maureen said in chat, of giving students power, agency, and so on. Let me quote you correctly. And as I say this, I hear my door opening, so
A little
I'm
person.
distracted. All right, so who wants to go next? So we have Hiram and Danielle.
I'll go. My name's Hiram Jackson. I actually teach geology. I'm not sure that I see an opportunity to use the book in my class, but use the book. But I actually have not read it, but I got a copy of it, and I was just interested when I learned that it was part of the OneBook project. I wanted to hear what other faculty had to say about it, and that's why I'm here. I came to the book because I was watching Henry Louis Gates' series of recent documentaries on the history of the U.S. from the end of the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement, and he covered lynching, and I think there was some. I think he interviewed Brian Stevenson in there with his memorial project, and so I actually became introduced to Brian Stevenson through that, and then learned that he had written this book, and I got interested in the book a little more when I think I guess it was in June, the movie became widely available because whoever distributes the movie just said it's available for free because of what happened to George Floyd, and also because of the pandemic and all. And so I saw the movie, and then I got the book, and so here I am.
All right, welcome to the group, Hiram. Feel free. I mean, I can't say, if you haven't started reading, I can't say much, but it's definitely a great read. Okay, so Danielle, how are you?
Hi everyone, how are you all doing? I'm Danielle. I teach in the English department. I'm also colleagues with Teacher Sagauke in the Umoja program, and this fall I'll be teaching English 300 for the Umoja program, and also English 300 108 in the English department. And this will be my first time incorporating Just Mercy into my class. It was technically on my syllabus last fall, but I actually did not end up using it. I mean, our Umoja students were given that book, so I just went with it, but I actually didn't teach it. So this will be my first time teaching it, and part of my reason for teaching it is that I like to kind of stay in line with what Teacher Sagauke is doing in his Umoja section, so that our sections have a lot in common. I mean, that is like a very practical reason. I mean, I'll just, some of you know me, some of you don't know me, but, my background is, in addition to teaching writing and literature, is Black studies. So I have, it's Black studies and social justice kind of research and activism. So like the topics that are in the book are near and dear to my heart, not unfamiliar to me, but in a way, so I don't really know why I didn't teach the book last year, but I'm still feeling hesitant, and I don't know why. I think some of it is practical and some of it is something else, and I have to figure out what that is. But I will say that I'm here to learn, and I'm already gaining some really great ideas. So for example, one thing that resonated with both aspects of like logistical and maybe personal or spiritual like hesitancy that I have going into this is, I was addressed by, I'm trying to think of, wait, where's my notes? I just took all these notes. Where is it? Anyway, I can't find it. But Christina, your assignment or your idea to rewrite, it was really stuck out to me, because I think one thing that I'm worried about, like whenever I look at the book, I just feel a sense of dread. And I know I expressed the same thing last year. I still have it. I have a sense of dread because it's like this topic and just the fact of, the facts behind this text are just way so heavy on my heart and mind that it's really hard to deal with. I'm afraid to deal with a big book all semester on this topic, basically. So I really like the idea of rewriting something so that you're instigating the social justice imagination and giving students agency to redo reality. And so giving them a sense of how they can, so I'm like taking this right from you right now, but it's really inspiring me because it gives me a sense that like they can, so that we're not just reading tragedy, but then we're empowered immediately to do something about it and to rewrite the future. And so that's what that assignment does as far as I'm concerned. I love it. And I love Lisa's follow-up question, because then it's like, oh yeah, like how do you actually give them the tools to do it accurately so it's not just like they're being, delusional about reality. So I'm going to definitely play with that assignment. I like that a lot. And I guess I'm just interested in how this conversation goes on. I do have a few questions. Is this an okay time to ask a couple questions? Teacher Sagape, I have some questions about like how you're approaching this. I'm modeling what you're doing as well, also because I do like the idea of keeping our Umoja sections kind of like working on similar things so that, in that Umoja community context, they'll have things in common. I didn't do very much of that last year, but I'm trying to do some more of that this year with you. I haven't planned, I should have been planning this with you earlier, but some questions, like now that we're going online, some of the things that you've done in the past, I'm thinking about how to translate into this online. So even, so the discussion questions that you're taking from the EJI website, in the past, how did you assign those and how did you receive those and evaluate them? And then how are you thinking about doing that this time? I'm gonna just like leave that question for now because I have a bunch of questions, but that's one question that I would love to hear your thoughts about.
Right. So for me, not much is gonna change in that respect because I've always done some of these kinds of assignments on Canvas. So it's already, I just have to figure out probably a way for it to self-grade. But I have always done that on Canvas where I post the questions and they can answer either just as a text entry or upload a file, so then I go in and grade. And typically when I grade them, I'm really interested in, so they go by fast because I'm interested, first of all, in the fact that they took the time to read and find the answers for these questions. So this goes by fast. I don't mark them down on, sentence structure and all those. I'm just interested in their answers, to make the job easier for me, at least for those responses, because there are so many of them. So it's all Canvas based. So for me, I guess I will continue using that format as well. The one part though that I mentioned is sometimes we sample some of the responses with the rest of the class, either asking volunteers to share some of their responses so they generate class discussion. So I guess in a Zoom context, that could probably be done in those breakout rooms where they are getting together 4 people to sort of go over what answers they were able to come up with in response to the discussion questions. So it's just part of group work. Or we can just have an overall, in class discussion on Zoom, because my English 300 part is meeting on Zoom every Monday and Wednesdays. So we have opportunities to talk about those things. There are also low stakes assignments. So I'm working with a brilliant student assistant as well, who might probably help me guide them through those discussion questions. She has read the book, has used it in a class already before. So I don't know, I hope that answers you.
Yeah, that helps. Unfortunately, yeah, I'm doing asynchronous, which I mean, I don't regret it. I don't regret it, but yeah, things like breakout rooms are not possible in that context. So I'm just gonna have to think a little harder about how to have, I like the idea of small groups working together on things. But I'm sure other people have that same issue. So I'll be curious to hear how people are strategizing that type of small group interaction.
Right. Or for,
I had one idea. Again, I haven't taught this book, but one of the things that you had brought up, Danielle, and I was feeling the same way, as a hesitancy to use the book. Honestly, I wouldn't be using it if I wasn't in this PD coordinator position. It would not be my choice. It's just a heavy time, and it feels extremely heavy to me. So one of the things that I've decided to do, I'm going to just try it for a couple of weeks, is I'm assigning 3 chapters a week. And I'm, rather than using the questions that are provided, by EGI, I'm going to ask for reading responses to 2 out of the 3 chapters. So it's like for chapters 1 through 3, I'll give them a very brief summary of what's contained in each, so that if they choose to, it seems like one of the chapters might have topics that are triggering, they can choose to skip that chapter. And because I would have skipped the chapters about children. I don't, if I was given the choice, I would have. And I don't think that, I think there is so much in this book. This is okay. So this is somebody who's not taught it, right? Mm-hmm. So take this with a grain of salt. But it seems to me like there is so much in this book. And the general narrative arc of it, if you're just looking at the main story.
You're right.
So I don't think that those people who choose to read, in a sense, 2/3 of it, are going to be missing a tremendous amount. Of course, I have to wait and see. I'm going to do that for the first couple, for the first 6 chapters, and see how that goes. I find that students in the past, when I've used this reading, it's guided reading response, I have a question that they're going to answer, not, what kind of car was he driving, which I kind of felt like some of those questions that are on the EGI website were kind of like that, what time of day was it when, it's like, dude, I have no idea. So, and the questions are based on things that interested me as I was reading. So, but I find that because I'm going to ask them to type out like essentially a half-page response, students don't like that. They would rather do the short answer questions. So we'll see how this goes. I might get a lot of pushback.
Are you going to evaluate, are you going to give credit for just responding, at that length, or are you how else are you gonna engage in those responses? Because I'm also thinking about, experimenting with time management in this new online, I've never taught an online course before, so. So
what I'm gonna do, because I'm like insane, is I'm going to try for the first time a grading contract. So so they just get credit for having done it. But in order to get credit for having done it, it has to be of a certain length. They are going to be required to edit. So it's not going to be like a journal brainstorm kind of thing. And then they also have to respond to 2 other people's posts. Oh, okay. And there's a certain length requirement for those as well, where they need to be able to address what that person is saying. So this is what I'm doing in lieu of chapter quizzes. So there will be each week 2 reading responses and 2, I can't remember. I'm trying to make it up. I'm making up all this stuff. And I spent a ton of time putting together a rubric for this, a holistic rubric for this, for both their response and the other. And then I go into Canvas and I cannot upload this rubric. I have to use their rubric thingy-wingy generator. And what I created does not fit with that generator. So yeah, that's how I'm doing it, Maureen, is with the discussion board. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, that's so the rubric thing I've got to work out, but we shall see. Yeah, so I will definitely look into that tag thing. Definitely, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, the idea of, having them do discussions and responding to so many, that once they get the hang of it, I mean, that may, and that's just a minimum in terms of responses, right? Because sometimes they could really engage in interesting dialogue over the text as well.
Yeah, so I'd like to add a little bit. So I got this from Greg Beyer, and basically with the discussion board, I require 2 responses. I call them tag responses. Tell them something you like, ask a question, give a suggestion. And that I make 1 tag response be for attendance, because I'm completely asynchronous. And then the second tag response is for 3 points. I place the rubric for the tag responses right inside the assignment. And then before the first tag response is due, I make a little video and I put it in announcements. And I basically give them a written and a video explanation for what is a tag response going to look like. So kind of demonstrating, you know, tell them something you like. Don't just say, oh, I like it when you said this, right? Mm-hmm. Tell them why you said you liked it, and maybe even a little background about what you liked, something specific. Ask them a question and maybe even provide a little bit of background for the inspiration for the question. Like, why did they ask that question? And, you know, let the students kind of build their responses for in a contrived environment into an organic environment. And then give a suggestion. Don't just say, you know, oh, you had a lot of spelling errors. You know, make it be some kind of constructive thing that advances the conversation. And so I've been doing this now for 3 semesters in Canvas. And I've found, 1, the students really get to know each other through the course of the semester, through the tag responses. And they build a kind of community and rapport. By the end of the semester, they're using nicknames and, you know, like they'll say things like in the give a suggestion, you know, you forgot to do X and such, and I really want you to get the points, you know, okay. And stuff like that. So they're super supportive and very much a community by the end. And again, just to make the last point there for Lisa, is I actually put the tag rubric in the actual original assignment. And then also give them a suggestion. I make a ton of little videos. And so one of the suggestions is that they use their iPhone reminders to remind themselves for the due date for the tag, which is always on a different date than the actual discussion board post was due. So there, sorry, yeah.
Can I ask you a question about that, Maureen? I like the tag responses, but I had a question about the constructive suggestion.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, because that's one thing with discussions that in the past, like I do like online discussions, and I've utilized them for sure in my regular like non-online classes a lot. But in the past I haven't, like I'm giving credit based on participation in the discussion, but I like the idea of that constructive aspect because I'm always like, you know, since it's a writing course, since I'm talking about writing courses, I'm not giving feedback on writing and discussions because I didn't really know how or why or, you know, anything like that. Right. Even though I've been tempted to, because like you see writing errors in the discussions, right? Or writing issues, I should say, writing issues. And how do you do that? And so do your students actually give constructive feedback about the writing itself, or more content based?
Sometimes one content, you know, you needed to develop your answer, or they'll say things like, you know, Professor Moore wanted 3 quotes in this discussion board post and you only gave 1. So you should do the others so you get all the points. So sometimes stuff like that. But sometimes they'll say things and they do it in just amazingly lovely ways. You know, you need to use spell check. Or, you know, I mean, so I found that the tag responses really foster community. One of the things that I'll do is because I'm really interested in the idea of community and free flow of ideas. I'm not interested in censorship or, you know, calling people out, right? That this generation in particular really hates that stuff. So if I see something that's happening in the discussion board that I think is degrading the quality of what's going on, I will privately talk to that student and say, I really think that, you know, this needs to happen, or you might want to consider changing it up. So I don't front them in the class, but I do direct them privately. And I've found that that also works. And students will apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry, Ms. Moore, I was using, you know, my cell phone to do that post, and it was just really hard for me that day. And, you know, I let it go. I never return to that issue unless I see it again. It's behind me. So yeah, totally try it out if you're interested. You know, I'd be curious to hear how it works for you. What happens?
You know what, on that note of managing the discussion board with Just Mercy, I just wanted to mention that I gave a lot of trigger warnings. And so, in fact, I'm going to have a section just on the syllabus that says trigger warnings, and then every week, because of just not just the experiences, but the quotes, the language, the N-word, but back to the N-word from Just Mercy. Because of all of the international students in the class and English language learners, I can't remember the phrase from Just Mercy that the student used, and they thought it was okay because Stevenson used it. It wasn't the N-word. It was an older phrase, and I can't remember why Brian Stevenson was using it at the time. But it was early in the book. The student used it in her post, and I messaged her. I said, we don't use that word either in writing or in conversation. And again, it wasn't the N-word. I want to say it was
Colored.
It wasn't colored.
Okay.
I think she said Black Negroes. You know, and you only see Negroes from like in like old, you know, you see Booker T. Washington using that word, and from older texts, you know, early 20th century, not now. And I just didn't want that to spark anything on the discussion board, and I wanted the student to know for the future. And so I did say something about that, but you reminded me of it whenever you said, Kyan, you know, if you see something on the discussion board, and we have the student assistants for the English 300 and 108 classes, so I have them help out with that.
You're lucky you have student assistants.
Yeah, we are. It's a blessing that we have kind of like not comb through, but just, you know, because this topic can get so it's very sensitive and personal for so many of our students who have had family members, or maybe they themselves have been incarcerated, and it's hard. Or even if they just to be so angry, you know, like you were saying, people were saying they have reservations about using the book. It's so raw, you know. This book really is contemporary. Well, it's always contemporary, but with recent events, I think students are going to be able to make just instant connections to what's going on in their world, even if they don't have any experiences or know anyone who has these experiences. You know, our whole country is suffering and we're healing and dealing with all of this. So I like Emmanuel's idea about what do you do now that you know this? Because I think that also empowers students to do something and, you know, don't feel as, well, you still feel hurt, but you know that this is something that, you know, that change is possible. So.
Wow, doing wonderful things here. Then, and the concerns of terms that may not be, you know, that are not appropriate to use and so on. So as Danielle maybe would agree, if you are teaching this book, say in the Umoja, that's a whole different, you know, at least, so I have to, this semester I will be switching then, almost like switching mindsets as well, because even the responses from students differ if they are coming from an Umoja class. In an Umoja class, it's quite interesting to watch how students are connecting and relating and resonating with issues. The only disadvantage that I've noticed in that case, there's also the idea that, you know, the approach that I already know this, so it may sort of slow them a little bit in terms of engaging with the text, because there's the question, what's new? I know it already. So our task ends up being of just teaching students whether or not they relate, connect with just how to work with text, you know, as a text, which is why I, you know, really am happy whenever they start critiquing the author himself, like, oh, not Stevenson, but then you realize why not, right? Because they are seeing, they don't like maybe the way he presented one topic. So I really do encourage that as well. Then over time, it actually becomes quite an informed response as well. But then when I switch to the other class with you know, a mixture of different students, you also begin to see some who are willing to really deal with the issues head on, others who are really treading a very careful kind of line so that they don't perhaps offend, especially in discussions. So it's still, as the instructor, I have to learn to manage that as well. Is it okay to sort of respond in this way? And at some point, you realize too that you can see in a response that a student is struggling with even, what do I say? Do I say Black people? Do I say African American? So you can see it. And as an instructor, you have to sort of somehow step in. And of course, we also have our own struggles, which is why I like the hesitance approach. Because I think if we can show that we are really also having difficulties with the text, it really leads to a richer interaction with students as well. I mean, I felt, yeah, go ahead, Hiram.
I was going to ask, do you only jump in if you see that there's a struggle with what language to use, or do you at the outset say, you know, it's appropriate to, do you lay the ground rules at the very beginning?
Right, there's yeah, at the very beginning it's a mixture of both. I'm caught right now, I'm caught between allowing a more organic approach, especially when you're dealing with texts, as opposed to a more prescriptive approach. But I do have on my syllabus some rules of what's appropriate, how to do things. But as we go, I'm also more interested in sort of seeing the organic development of how the students engage with the text. So that's why there might be certain things may happen without me even expecting them to, because I mean, I didn't have a whole set of rules at the very beginning. So, and I think I benefit from both approaches as well. I don't know, what do others think? You know, we teach, unlike teaching geology, we teach, I mean, teaching English itself, and when you are teaching English and you are teaching a text like this, our field is even also sort of shifting in how it's a very prescriptive kind of field we were taught a certain way, and we can come off as just telling students what to do, right? So we are sort of holding back in some of these prescriptive approaches, try and see what we can get as well from our students. So there's that balance of trying an organic kind of approach. Am I making sense? English people?
I think one of the things that I've noticed is that students like the, I don't know, the safety feeling of having, I don't know, guidelines. But I think what I've tried to do is say, these are the guidelines. These are why I developed these guidelines. If there's a reason these should shift, explain to me how they should shift and why, so that they're at least, so that we begin with guidelines, right? And then if somebody sees a different way of doing things, that they are then being asked to do what we're asking them to do in our discipline anyway, which is to articulate the rationales behind their decisions. So like when I taught American Lit, and we did an excerpt of, I think, I don't know, was Huckleberry Finn, was it part of our thing or whatever, I just said the N-word is not permissible in this class. There's my guideline for you. You know, and I didn't, in that case, I didn't even give anybody the option to protest.
So how does that work?
But I might now, you know.
If I could ask,
you can't do it. You can say the N-word, that's it. Sorry.
If I could ask, how does that work if you're trying to read an excerpt from Huckleberry Finn and then there's the N-word?
You have to substitute the word, the N-word,
okay,
when you come to it.
Okay.
And, you know, I mean, I didn't give options, but I've also assigned that ancient essay by Gloria Naylor of, you know, what's in a word, where she actually examines the N-word, and there too, for the sake of our discussion, it's okay, you know, I mean, unless there's a reason there, I opened it up a little bit more, okay. But somebody had to have a good rationale, and also, you know, have to come from a culture where people use that word in a loving way with one another, to have the cachet to say that I have the, for lack of a better word right now, authority to use it in my class. I mean, for the sake of expressing what I'm saying. But I'm so old school, you guys. Like, I'm rules up one side and down the other for certain things. I'm trying to loosen up, but anyway, that's one approach.
Can I say something about? Oh, sorry.
This is a big topic.
I know. I probably shouldn't even go there, but I'll say something really quickly because I just feel like, I don't want to. And Lisa, I appreciate you explaining how you go about that. I just want to share that, like, I've been on both sides of that. I feel like earlier in my teaching career, I was more open about like being flexible about allowing a word like, you know, the N-word into the classroom, especially when we were reading directly from the text, because, you know, my idea was I didn't want to censor the text. And that if we were quoting, it was permissible, and that I also just allowed flexibility based on people's comfort level. Oh shoot, kids are about to break in here, darn. People's comfort level, you know, proximity. I say, like, if you feel like you have a proximity to the term based on culture and identity, then, you know, you can make that decision for yourself. But then over time, you know, students would say, well, usually I open it up for discussion too. Like, I would kind of put my initial rules and I said, let's discuss in like the first day of class and see as a class how we decide we're going to use this. And then over a few years, people would say, can we just not use that word? I'm like, okay, fine, we won't do that word. And so because I got enough times from enough people, I'm like, you know what? And these are from mainly Black students, you know, and so I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to not use that word. But I make a couple of exceptions reading the text, but I read the text. So for example, I often start off a couple of my classes with a poem by County Cullen called The Incident. It's a very short poem that features the N-word in there, and it really illustrates the power of that word, actually. So we have a discussion about that poem and that word. I read it because if I don't read the word, you don't get the power. of the word. So I warn everyone, I'm going to read this. I'm not going to feel great about reading this word, but I'm going to read it so you can hear the word and its power. And then I just want to add one more thing. Is like, I also love having the discussion about, you know, in my classes, it's often the identity terms to describe people of African descent. So that's something that comes up, that identity group in particular comes up a lot. And I just love having the discussion because I get to talk about the history of the evolution of the term and the fact that even today, you know, I say, you know, today the most common term is Black with a capital B. A couple years ago, it was Black with a lowercase b. I remember just not too long ago, it was Black with a lowercase b, and it's kind of for these reasons, although some people would say Black with a lowercase b. Today, it's more Black with a capital B for this reason. And I just love having that discussion, but then students don't always remember that. And it does depend on the context. So if I'm talking about this in an Umoja class, it's very different than talking about this in like a non-Umoja class. And I definitely have that conversation, like, you know, with international students, oftentimes, even after having that initial conversation, yeah, you have to have a couple private conversations about, like, to further explain. So anyway, just talking about that because it is a big topic, but I just love I love the topic because it's really vibrant. I don't know how else to explain it.
Thank you. I can hear the passion in the voice in terms of how, yeah, it's a great topic, and what a wonderful question, Hiram. Thank you for that question. So I need to show you, wow, in terms of time, you guys did great, but I need to share my screen very briefly, so at least this document, which is also part of the documents I brought, will be visible. So let me see if I can locate it quickly. It's a PowerPoint. Right, so home. Okay, give me a second here. Or slideshow, okay. All right. So I share my screen. It's okay. So there's this PowerPoint that we've been editing and adding to. So originally created by Emily Bond, because she used to do the flex for the OneBook, and I took over when we were already discussing Just Mercy. So it does have, okay. All right, so I'll post this somewhere as well. Actually, the link, how does this work, Lisa? It will just appear, right? Since we are recording.
I think it will, but I think what would be even more helpful would be to post it directly into the OneBook Canvas page that Heather created. So if you just put it in there, then we'll have access to it, but everybody else will also.
Okay, so this one, at least it does about 10 slides. It does show you all the resources that we're referring to as well. So like this is a slide about some of the key quotes from his introduction, you know, which I think are really powerful. They will guide the discussion or how we approach the text. Then a little bit about the OneBook program itself, a little history, what inspired it, what books, what are our goals. So I share some of these with my students as well, just the goals of, you know, the OneBook program itself, what it's intended to do. Then a little bit about the writer. Links now also to the Just Mercy discussion guide. You know, if you want to go take a few questions from there, then related readings and resources from our own library. So this is frequently updated. Emily Bond seems to be updating it frequently. Then best time for activities and involvement. I wanted to find out from Lisa, there are going to be OneBook activities. They may not necessarily say OneBook, I think. In my thinking, there could be activities or presentations related or relevant to the text. So we are all probably used to the speaker, Lasana Hotep, who talks about equity I think his presentations are quite relevant. So it seems the college is going. So Lisa, we're going to keep on inviting him as needed, right?
Yeah, so two things. One is that in terms of activities specific to Just Mercy and OneBook, that would be a committee decision. Last year, the committee was extremely small, and I am not a good committee, being a full committee. I was not, it was hard to do that. So this year, I would like other people to step forward and say, I would like to create a certain number of events, or I would like to be the person who will try to secure speakers, or I would like to be the person who will provide a student-centered discussion or whatever. And that would be something that we would decide as a committee. As far as I'm concerned, if this isn't going to work as a committee, it's not going to work. So it can't just be a single person kind of thing, and it won't be this year. So that's one thing. So we'll wait until we all get together as a committee to do that. And then in terms of Lasana Hotep, he and I think her name is Cynthia, I can't remember. Two people have been hired by the district to lead equity work across Los Rios. So Lasana Hotep came and gave some presentations specific to CRC at the end of last semester, but now he's going to be helping to coordinate the work on anti-racism across the district. And so I don't know what that's going to look like in terms of what specifically will be offered and how it will be offered. We're trying to work more in sync with each other, right? Especially now that we're all in all four colleges are trying to work in sync with each other, especially now that we're in the online environment.
Okay. So there's just a lot that's going on, and it's the best time to link, some of the activities we do in classes. We read the Just Mercy. So important links. I found, so Georgia State University does use it as their first year program. This is a powerful resource. They do have suggestions on activities to do, and it's particularly, so it's almost like a type of OneBook program as well that they run, but for first year students. And we have, so this, the EG, Equal Justice Initiative itself does have resources as well. Then, so I'll post this on the, Canvas shell for OneBook as well, because it leads to a lot of, lesson plans, everything, great suggestions.
So selfishly, Manu, do you mind if it's possible to post it in this chat too, since I'm going to be working on this during my lunch break?
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so let me get out of share here. Okay, so it's 12:30. I don't know, it's not gonna kick us out, but I know people have places to go. So do you guys have questions, last minute questions before we go?
I have just one short. For our committee meeting for this, I'm trying to stretch it out. Like, my strategy for the book is 8 weeks for Just Mercy, but I would like to go a little bit longer. I want to incorporate some other videos and other outside mediums to talk about the subject. So whatever ideas, so maybe for our meeting, if you all have any ideas for any other type of video. And also I'm trying to strategically balance out, like, I don't know if this is, I know I only have it, like, we're over time, but I want, students are seeing this narrative in this image, and like I have the assignment where they're rewriting some of this, or what would happen if blank blank had happened. I just want to do try to incorporate some success stories or different narratives of boys and men in color, and I don't want to say, remember that song, I'm Everyday People? Just like everyday people, just who are doing it. They're maybe work at, you know, the Department of Justice, or they work in accounting, they're doing something, but their narrative is not. I mean, I recently can't get the image of George Floyd and how he died out of my mind. And then we're reading this book, and that it kind of activates triggers, and that's just me as a professor, and I don't know what it's doing to these students. So I just want to try to celebrate Blackness and celebrate people of color more, and that this isn't the only story. I don't know. So I'm looking to try to do that if anyone has any ideas for our next meetings.
Christina, Georgine Hodgkinson did Release Time, and I think she might have some success stories. I know she held a workshop last year, might have been in the fall, and she had this long-standing relationship with a student at CRC who had been formerly incarcerated. Okay. And so she kind of highlighted his story, but I think, and then she did her sabbatical work. So I think she might have some really good stuff, and I would connect with her.
Okay, I will.
And we have a ton of local resources like the Sacramento Men and Boys of Color, Brown Issues, and some other groups that are doing wonderful things. There's the Congress of African Peoples, and the Talking Drum is a newsletter that puts out good news about the Black community. And so I think tapping into some of the local leaders that we have would be really helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I just, like I said, and then people who have never gone to school with African Americans, Black people, people of color, thinking that this isn't it. This is not the only narrative. And anyway.
There's so much. Beyonce's new album, video album that dropped, is like celebrating Black culture like nothing else. So you,
yeah, maybe I'll check that. Open with that.
Who's Danielle?
Beyonce's latest.
Beyonce, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to thank you. So this is just the beginning. You guys were wonderful. It happened as I expected, that you guys, this was your gathering, so you took over. You took over the narrative. Okay. Thank you. I'll send, so this will be shared, and I'll post things in the Canvas page as well. Thank you, everybody.